Welcome as we prepare for the fifth ordinary Sunday, Te Rā Tapu Tuarima o He Wā Noa. We're breaking open Isaiah 58, 1 to 12, but also casting an eye on the Gospel for Sunday, Matthew 5, just seeing where the links are. I note too a line from the collect set for this coming Sunday. We praise you, God, that the light of Christ shines in our darkness and is never overcome. And perhaps in our crazy, unsettling days, we can find signs of Christlight in this reading. Gillian, Damon, Ben, welcome. And Gillian, you've done the extra homework. Thank you.
Well, I found this fascinating. I mean, this is one of my favorite passages in the entire Bible, probably actually. But in digging into some of the background, I hadn't really quite realized, I don't think, that it had been written, or most scholars think it's been written in that kind of post-exilic period. So the Jewish people have been in exile in Babylon for 70 years and are now returning, and they've found their temple ruined, their city ruined, and they are trying to rebuild and are really struggling. Like harvests seem to have failed, and they have sort of, if you like, doubled down on their religious rituals to perhaps really try and remind God of how much of a victim they are, or victims they are, and to try and get God's attention to their plight. And Zechariah chapter 7 tells us that the Jewish people after their return were fasting twice a year, twice a year. So it was quite a big thing, and they've kind of really launched into that. You know, fasting was a way to humble yourself before God, but it seems that there's something here where it's more about, hey, we're the victims. And so you really, since we are fasting, their expectation is that God should bless them, or should at least hear their plight and answer in the way maybe they want. So there's quite a lot going on there. They want God to bless them and give them justice, but we'll see what happens with that.
You know, that's a really interesting thing because it's not so long since we heard coming out of that other big country, United States, something about claiming victim status. So we might find some interesting connection there. I won't go there just yet. I'll start, Damon, by asking you, what's challenging here?
Well, of course, I mean, this passage was written, what, 2,500 years ago or so, and yet its applicability is still today. And so as we hear it on the Sunday, it's speaking to us and to our situation too. And Michael, you began by talking about the collect for this coming Sunday, but two other collects came to my mind. One is one that we say often on a Sunday, which is the collect for purity, which, so that we may truly love you and worthily praise your holy name. And it picks up the whole idea of, what does true worship look like? There's another beautiful collect, which we're probably familiar with, about God of all power and might. It goes on, and it says, increase in us true religion. So I think the real challenge for me is that every week we're confronted by this text. What is the nature of true worship? Is it just turning up and going through the motions of worship on a Sunday morning? Or is it much more about the 7 days a week of our lives all around us? There's homelessness, there's hunger. When this passage will be read on Sunday, it will be around the time of Waitangi Day, and all the injustices and debates and emotions that it evokes. So it calls us to really look at our own lives and the life of our communities. So a big challenge for us, for me.
Utterly big. Yeah, thanks for that. I think because it's squirmish stuff. Ben, what is for you challenging?
I'd echo much of what Damon said. That phrase "true religion" from those well-known collects, jumped out at me reading this passage, and I think, like you, I tied it with liturgy. For me, that great confessional, for the wrongs we have done and for the good we have not done, and the wrongs we've done is often the easy stuff, and they're the first to mind, and for me at least. But the good we have not done, there's just so much. There's always more that I know I could and sometimes should be doing. And so that struggle to be and do what I'm called to be and do, which is more than just the religious rituals, but is the fourth mark of mission, the transformation of society. So I
Yeah,
think that
thank
was the
you.
challenge for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm reminded again, I think it's Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the remaining silent in the face of evil is
Mm.
itself sin. So, Gillian, we're in cheerful stuff here. What are you going to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, this has got to be one of the most challenging passages, doesn't it, to those of us who are in church and who enjoy church life, who enjoy our worship, who find beauty in the music and just all so many aspects that, or just being busy, our busy calendars, like so many aspects of our lives. And this challenges so much of that. I think of it as a bit being a bit like a kind of a spiritual mirror that it forces you to look in the mirror and actually see what's there. And, we might be like Sleeping Beauties, no, not Sleeping Beauties, Snow White's, the stepmother person who looks in the mirror, has got that magic mirror, who's the fairest of them all and expects the answer to be me. Or we might be like, who deserves God's blessing? It's got to be me or got to be us. But actually, the answer that comes back is not the one that's expected, and that's the shock of that and quite a challenge. So, yeah, there's a lot. All of the things that everyone else has said is so true.
So we're left in a slightly, as I said, squirmy place. Let's start finding some good news. Ben, where is it?
Reading this passage, it makes me think of Micah 6:8, kind of that same theme, but expanded. And I think the good news is the picture of the God that it reveals. That God is not a God that expects that's tit for tat. God's not a slot machine God. God's not a God that desires something for God's self. But what delights God's heart is showing love and justice to neighbor and to stranger, to friend and to foe. And so there's where I find the good news, that the picture of God that's revealed in this is a God of just remarkable love that isn't keen on showering blessings on those who, humble themselves to Him, but want real love and real service to others.
And there's an opportunity just to flag the Beatitudes that we'll be reading in the gospel passage. How blessed are those who get out and do. So yes, thank you. Let's then ask you, Gillian, for beginnings of some good news, more good news.
Yeah, well, for all the challenges of the kind of the first half of the passage, the second half, oh my gosh, there's just so many beautiful promises there. And we haven't really been having much of a summer here, and it's been very wet. So it's not really the drought that's talked about in the passage, but that idea that in a time of drought, God can create in us that well-watered garden. Yeah, I mean, our gardens are pretty well-watered, but the idea that intimacy with God is promised there, and that God will strengthen and guide and satisfy us. But it's that thing of like when you have actually turned your heart towards the heart of God, which is towards justice and compassion for others. So I find that pretty much good news there, really.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm very aware at the moment. I have a daughter who's farming in central Victoria, and the temperature's in the high 40s, and understanding drought, but yeah, and yet finding blessings. So, all right, let's ask you, Damon, for good news.
Yeah, well, I think, the passage talks about, when we do these things, when we do attend to justice and doing what is right, we are living in the presence of God. That's it. That's good news in itself. When we do these things, we are experiencing in that place all that God is. And I think for us as Christians, we interpret these passages in the light of the person of Jesus Christ. And we've talked about the Sermon on the Mount, but these words from Isaiah 58, or at least part of them, feature in Luke chapter 4, when Jesus says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me," and goes on to talk about the sense of the reversal of the order of things, and then he goes on to say, "These words have been fulfilled in your hearing." So the sense that this passage has been fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ, and I just think that's an amazing thing. Now, of course, the other challenge for us is, are we ready to embody that within our own lives, within our own communities? But there's good news there.
All right, thank you. Right, well, Gillian, so what?
Oh gosh, well, I was kind of trying to think about a bit of my context and working with young people, and there's some pretty powerful so what's here, really, because there's that idea that it's not a kind of about who you think you should be and projecting an image of what you think is the right kind of thing, that kind of perhaps performative thing. It's about the substance there. So sometimes I find that, it's easy for people to get onto an issue and maybe just through social media, maybe you've clicked a like or you've changed your profile pic to kind of with the kind of latest hashtag or something like that and think that you're kind of doing a good thing and people will see that and everything. But the reality is, where's the substance to that and the actual action that goes with it and the standing with the people, not just not just liking something or doing a hug emoji. So sometimes there's that challenge to not just have that performative, how other people see things, but to actually have the substance to it. And I think, that's just a really powerful sort of a challenge. Oh, well, again, it's a challenge, isn't it? But it's how we live in these days when we're seeing what's happening around and not just clicking.
And I'm sorry to say, guilty as charged, I think. Damon, for you, so what?
I'm reminded in this passage that it was spoken to a people, and I think there's a political level there for us in terms of what we expect and what we demand of our politicians in terms of looking after the least as well as all people. It's about all of us, and that really speaks through that ethical call to us. And so as individuals, what are the demands that we're putting? What are we asking our politicians to do within the wider political sphere? But for most of us, that's too big, too hard to do that. And so it comes back to the individual as well. And I think of the itinerant person who often week by week will come to my door and ask for help. And what does love look like in that context? Well, the first thing is, of course, is to see in the other something of the being or the person of Christ. It's something of seeing that as a human being who demands my respect. In whatever way I therefore respond. But that's the starting point for me. The other so what for me, though, I think is actually when we hear this passage, it will be, if I'm right, the Sunday before Ash Wednesday. I think that's correct. And within the liturgy that we use here in the Upper Clutha, in our service, it begins with the words, "This is the day for new beginnings with God, for putting aside the sins and failures of the past and beginning afresh." It's also a day when we're brought face to face with our own mortality, upon which we reflect in the light of the redeeming love of Christ. And so what for me is the intentionality that this coming Lent offers us the opportunity to make those changes in our personal lives, but also in our corporate lives. And within many of our Ash Wednesday liturgies, there's a litany of penitence. And I just looked at one phrase earlier on. We've been blind to human need and suffering and indifferent to injustice and cruelty. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. So we're being called into this space. And so the so what is, will we take seriously this journey through Ash Wednesday, from the ashes to the cross and beyond?
Yeah, likewise, it's hard to read this and not think of Ash Wednesday and the Lenten journey. It's one of the potential readings instead of Joel for Ash Wednesday. And so it's a reminder for me as I look to that process of keeping the main thing, to constantly ask the question, if my congregation closed up shop tomorrow, would my community notice? And that's a good acid test, I think, for whether or not the way we're living out our faith is what we're called to do from this passage and from the person and the work of Jesus. So I think that constant reminder. The other very personal so what for me is to print out and laminate verse 12 as I rebuild a cathedral. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. This is a helpful thing to have in front of me at all times. So those are my so whats.
So fresh in our memories are the deaths of Ms. Good and the nurse, the ICU nurse, Alex Pretty, in Minneapolis, standing up for what they, I think rightly, saw as justice, and they challenge us all. So thank you for joining me on this. This is Isaiah at his best in some ways, and it makes us revel a bit. Thanks for being a part of it.